This episode of the Disruption Lab is taped in front of a live studio audience.
Let's give it up.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. If you guys don't know my guest, Erik Murray, he's full of energy. So my goal is to keep him in the chair for as long as I can tonight. Erik, you've built funds, developed real estate, and now you are leading what I would characterize as community development innovation. You've also got a focus on clean tech, sustainable housing, and entrepreneurship with the work that you're doing in Kansas City, Kansas. So what was the turning point for you in your career, or when did you realize that this wasn't just about buildings, it wasn't just about development, but it was about something bigger in this concept of building community?
Yeah, I think the easiest answer to that is just Oakland, California. And as a kid who grew up in Kansas City, grew up in KCK, for anybody who knows me, they'll know very quickly I'm a dot guy. We're going to talk a lot about the dot. But being from Wyandotte County, I've got a ton of formative experiences and this big chip on my shoulder and all these other things that I'm sure we'll touch on. But to grow up here and then go live in Oakland, California, and there's actually some parallels. I mean, we're talking about music even as we open the top of the show. I say things like hella, and hella is actually a word that like came out of Oakland and this hyphy music scene. Sadly, one of Oakland's favorite artists, Mac Dre, was actually killed here in Kansas City. There's a point to that. There's a lot of parallels between Oakland and Kansas City and just the Bay and KC. But in terms of the answer to your question, growing up in Kansas City, we didn't talk about all of the things. Go to Oakland, California, the birthplace of every social justice movement, the birthplace of the Black Panthers, all of these things. In Oakland, you're going to talk about everything. And so here, it was all about real estate development. How do we get our projects done? In Oakland, well, why are you doing it? And for who are you doing it? And how are you doing it? And embedding all of those decision trees into your project. And then understanding kind of the risk behind thinking myopically about only a single bottom line in the real estate development work that we do and not taking all of those Oaklandish, as I'll call them, factors into consideration adds a whole nother element of risk and things that you've got to mitigate in a project. So it was a great experience. The decade that I spent in Oakland, the eye-opening social justice conversations that it triggered, learning about the music and people being like, wait a second, you're not from Oakland. Why do you say hella? Kid from Kansas City, and learning about the ties to even Mac Dre, but really figuring out how to embed social justice and culture and all of those things into our projects. And then learning how to educate investors and educate the marketplace on why those things were important. I just think that time I spent in Oakland was hugely valuable. And I give Oakland a lot of credit because a lot of people who knew me as a kid growing up would say, man, you're different now. You didn't talk about all of this social justice stuff that you think about now. And I say, go spend a decade, having lunch with Elaine Brown, who's one of the original founders of the Black Panthers. It'll change some wiring in your brain. So to come back to Kansas City and look at the things that we talk about on the East Side in particular, and to look at them through the lens of what I learned in Oakland was just hugely formative. So the takeaway, go spend a decade or even a year or even a week or two in Oakland, California, and I think it'll change your mind on some things,
It seems today, in today's world, we have these debates about development all the time. It seems that there's a paradox there, though. Like in developers, the margins, we hear, projects need to pencil out. Developers are in this to make money. There's this constant tension between development incentives and schools and public good and those types of things. But you're talking about development that is for public good, development that is for community. So how do you, when you say, you said, I need to educate funders, I need to educate, the investors and folks like that. How does that education work when you're talking about, is it a sacrifice? Is it a triple bottom line conversation? Like, what is the conversation that leads to them understanding this balance that you're trying to make?
Yeah, I love that question because I had to understand that there were three different sources of capital or three different funders. And to be clear, all of the development that I've done in my career has been for private equity, okay? Private equity, generally speaking, cares about one thing, making more money and making a return on that equity. So you have public equity, which cares about the return to the public and the public shareholders. And then you've got philanthropy, which has a whole different set of goals. But I had to understand that as a private equity investor, the private equity guys really wanted a return on their investment. They wanted profit, but that profit, the amount of profit that they expected was relative to the risk. And I think that was the lever that I could pull, right? Because you touched on it. We've done a lot of different, creative real estate executions in a lot of different industries. And so I'm not a hotel guy or a housing guy or an industrial guy. I've done all of those product types. I tell people we're a professional problem solver. And the problem that we're trying to solve now is the equitable investment of capital into neighborhoods and communities that we love, whether that's for industrial purposes, for innovation parks, for housing. The Eastside communities that we work in need all of those things. And one of the cool things that's happening, and we're seeing this across the board, I tell people necessity is the mother of invention. So today, there are frameworks for the kind of work that we're doing in public-private partnerships. Or what we're doing now, Kevin, is P4, public-private philanthropic partnerships, where you can blend that capital and you can give everybody a piece of what they want. But at the end of the day, mind you, 10 years ago when I went to Oakland to do this, I was only investing private equity. And so I had to ask myself, how do I get private equity to rethink? Private equity, given its own devices, just wants to do one thing: charge the most rent that it can, okay? And once I understood that, I said, well, wait a second, relative to what, right? Relative to the cost of financing. Okay, what is your cost of financing tied to? At the end of the day, I learned it's all tied to risk. So how do you de-risk a transaction? Well, a great kind of turning point in my mind didn't happen in Oakland, but it happened in Baldwin Hills, Crenshaw Plaza. A developer, a private equity developer called CIM Group, went into LA, went into an East Side neighborhood, Baldwin Hills in LA, and tried to do a mixed-use development without sitting down and understanding the community, without understanding the culture, without asking the stakeholders what they wanted to see. They spent several $1 million on pre-development at risk that they lost because when they finally got to the end of the road where they could make that presentation to the community, they hadn't done their homework. So the risk was not mitigated in community, and they lost a bunch of private equity money. So the learning from watching that happen and filtering that through the lens of social impact and culture in Oakland said, well, wait a second. If I can go to the community sooner and I can get community buy-in, we can think together and work together about, well, what is it that you need? What is it that the community wants? What does the investor want? I'm just the intermediary that's trying to bring that capital from the investor into the community and do it in a way that everybody is happy. Investor's gonna have to make money. Community's gonna have to feel bought in. Ultimately, the project's gonna have to drive some impact or something that's gonna make it successful. So when you can blend all three of those things, you bring your risk way down, you bring your time to execute way down, you bring the amount of tension that exists when you open a new thing anywhere. So being able to translate that into investment outcomes, hey, I could go and make you $1,000 a month in rent, but in order to get there, you're gonna have to step on all this broken glass, the community's gonna beat you up, the city council's gonna drag you through the mud.
Right.
What if you just made $700 instead of $1,000, but it was a much easier path? You feel good about that? There's ways that we can mitigate that risk, and that's what we got good at.
Do you have, I hear you, and it seems very logical to be able to go to someone and say, we can get it done faster, we can get it done without the friction, but you're gonna have to take less money. Our investors have to be fairly sophisticated and or experienced to have lived that, like stepped on that glass previously.
For sure.
And so is that an issue that you see with investors?
Yeah, it's not for everybody.
Okay.
And I think that was the other thing I had to learn. My mom would tell me as a kid growing up, you're gonna hear some dot stories in here. Son, you're short, you're black, nobody's gonna give you anything, you're gonna have to work your tail off, stay in school forever, and find a way, right? Hard work is gonna get you. But one important thing, and we talked about it on this stage here when Craig Moore did the Don't Believe the Hype, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do anything. So I come to every situation with the belief that with hard work and creativity, we can get it done. But I had to reframe my mind that no, there are some investors that just don't want to hear it. They're so focused on myopic profit that they don't understand the value And I have to be okay with that, as opposed to me banging my head against a brick wall and thinking that everybody's going to share the logic that we share. I had to first off be okay with the fact that not everybody's going to get there.
Yep.
So then we became self-selective for capital partners that were willing to have that discussion. You brought up an important point, though. I don't think that impact investing always has to be a sacrifice, always has to be less. In that example that I gave you, where the rent went from $1,000 to $700, so you're like, well, wait a second, they took $300 less than what, right? What other levers did we pull in that process? Their financing costs went way down. Their carry costs went way down. So 700 over a denominator of 100 might actually be better than 1,000 over a denominator of 500, right? So we just learned how to pull those different levers. And again, I want that to be a takeaway. I don't want the narrative around impact capital and impact investing always to be less than.
Yep.
I don't want the narrative around Eastside communities to be less than. Chip on my shoulder, I don't want the narrative around the dot to be less than. There's a universe where everybody wins, and it's all a growth mindset that we have where nobody's being forced to make sacrifice. And that is what we strive to do. We don't always get there, but that is what we strive to do. Yeah,
you're never going to hit the targets you don't aim for.
Yep.
So, you've mentioned, you've said East Side. I stopped counting at about 5.
Yeah, sorry,
you've
yeah.
said East Side a bunch of times. So I want to talk a little bit about why East Side is so important. So you lead an organization. You founded an organization called Eastside Innovations. You guys have a thesis around this. So talk a little bit about why the East Side of all these communities, and what is the thesis that you guys have, walked away with, and that you're practicing in terms of some of the development you're doing.
Yeah, great question. I wish I had come up with this because it's both brilliant and simple. And once I say it, or once it was said to me, it became obvious. But I want to give credit where credit is due. A guy from East Palo Alto by the name of Stephen DeBerry. Stephen's a really interesting guy. If I can get him to Kansas City, we'll have him on one of your disruption labs, because he's done everything from real estate development. He started his career as a cultural anthropologist. He applied cultural anthropology to the startup and the entrepreneur ecosystem. So he is really more of a venture capitalist than he is a real estate developer. But he understood, as you understand, the connection between placemaking and venture. And so he applied his analytical brain to say, why do I live, East Palo Alto being Silicon Valley, the epicenter of the tech world, why do I live in the richest, most innovative, most prosperous place in all of America, in Silicon Valley, and there's still this other side of the tracks, which is East Palo Alto? And he said, it can't be just Palo Alto. You got East Oakland, East Detroit, East Kansas City. Why do all of these East Side communities exist? The short version of the story is he paid a bunch of scientists to model smokestack dispersion and realized the through line between communities in the United States were largely developed, big cities in the United States were largely developed in the era of two things. Those two things were industrialization and legal segregation. So what does industrialization do? Industrialization in the 1900 to really today, we're just now getting smarter about climate change and environmental impact.
I thought we were. But
yeah,
anyway,
you were creating all these factories. These factories would either create contaminants that would go into the soil, or more likely they would put smoke into the air. So during this carbonization economy and this industrialization economy, the smoke would go into the air. The earth spins, so largely due to the way that the earth spins, the winds generally blow, the prevailing winds blow to the east. So he realized when somebody says, I'm from the wrong side of the tracks was the east side of the tracks, because the smoke off the train was going by, blowing to the east. The smoke from the factory blowing to the east. A highway cuts through your neighborhood. Where does the pollutants from that blow? To the east. So then he said, well, okay, that's not the only. So even though industrialization was part of the logic, what else was occurring during that time? Legal segregation. So we were not trying to develop for the benefit of everyone. You had restrooms that said whites only, blacks only. Apply that logic to a developing city, and you ask yourself, who's got to sit with the dirty train smoke blowing in their face? Who's got to sit with the factory soot blowing in their face? And it's people with less power. Political power at that time meant blacks only, et cetera. So when you applied those two things, you had largely black and brown communities during this era of legal segregation that lived with the smoke blowing in their face, while, and even post-segregation, in desegregation eras, you had white flight that would leave these areas, go out to the suburbs, build entirely new communities on the west side, and leave those east side communities to bear the brunt of that. And so we face that in the eastern side of Kansas City, Missouri. Near and dear to my heart is, again, Wyandotte County. And so when you look at it, the west, look at Legends and the Speedway and all of that. So that dynamic has been playing out in cities. Stephen does a great job of talking about the fact that some of those things are natural. The way that the earth spins is a natural byproduct.
Yeah.
But the design decisions that we make as an economy, right? So then redlining. Banks made a decision, where do they lend, right? Then planning directors made a decision, well, where do we put liquor stores versus grocery stores? Then retailers started making a decision, well, I want to locate my retail thing close to the higher income. So it created this downward spiral of east side disparity. And so if we understand that logic, and we now get to think about building new economies and driving equitable and impactful investments, if we know that pollution and segregation created this problem, our thought was then clean energy and innovation should be at the forefront of solving this. So we are making a conscious decision not to accept east side disparity and to turn that frown upside down by changing that predominant logic to say we are going to give east side communities the benefit of innovation, entrepreneurship, clean energy. All of the design decisions that did not go our way in the 1960s are going to go our way in 2030 if we can do anything about it. So
when I hear you talk about this, Erik, it oftentimes in the conversations that I've had over the years, it makes me think of, this four-letter word that everybody talks about, gentrification. And I think just to baseline, my perspective is gentrification is not the bad word. It's the displacement it creates that becomes the bad word. So from your perspective, when you talk about east side disparity to east side prosperity, that's like the tagline I've heard you talking about with Eastside Innovation. What does prosperity look like for these communities when you're doing the type of, we're talking about Midtown Station, which is a project we're now partnered on.
Yeah.
You're talking about $1 billion development that's going into an area that, is this displacement a risk? Is this, gentrification concern, real when you're talking about developing on a parcel like that? From your thesis or from this idea, what does prosperity look like for these communities and how do you get there?
Yeah, no, that risk is real. There are folks who would look at what we do. If you don't really peel it back and understand it, you could easily argue that what we're doing appears gentrifying because of the correlation between gentrification and nice shit. But I remind people that everybody at their core likes nice shit. And even when we were developing retail businesses, we always talked about accessible luxury. Every brand in the world that's successful understands accessible luxury. You put a Corvette on the showroom floor, even though 90% of your customers walk in and leave with a Corolla, right? Hermès has the $3,000 handbag in the door to sell you the $300 briefcase or wallet. So no matter where you are in the price point, everybody likes nice things. How do we deliver nice things to a community? Because everybody, in my belief, deserves access and opportunity to nice things. It's just how are you intentional about not displacing and doing it in a way that respects the reality of that community? So I'll give you a great example, housing. When we first went to develop the housing at Midtown Station, at the old Indian Springs site, we got a ton of pushback because everybody said, Erik, this looks and feels like luxury housing, but you want to finance it with a low-income housing tax credit. So they couldn't wrap their mind around that dichotomy because ordinarily a low-income housing tax credit meant that you were going to build you were going to slap two pieces of cardboard together and call it housing and try to convince somebody that that's where they were supposed to live. Or luxury housing, the lofts that you see in the river market, you were going to charge somebody $3 or $4 grand a month for a studio. They couldn't figure out that we were going to build something that looked and felt like the luxury housing, but still finance it and deliver it at a price point. Well, what we had to understand is if you look at the total cost of housing or the total cost of occupancy, your rent is just the first level problem. You afford your rent, but then what happens? Your utilities get shut off because you can't afford the light bill. Or you pay the rent and the light bill, but then you can't afford your car, your gas, or your car insurance. So as we started to look at the holistic cost of home ownership or of renting and just being a tenant, being an occupier in space, we had to ask ourselves, is the nice shit that we're building to make more profit for the developer? It could be. Or are we leveraging that to reduce the cost of occupancy? So a great example, in an ordinary building, you pay a $200, on top of the rent, whatever the rent is, you pay a $200 utility bill to Evergy, PG&E, BPU, et cetera. In our buildings, there is no utility bill. That nice building that I built, you say, wow, this is a concrete floor and concrete walls, and there's solar panel on the roof. All of those things that look and feel expensive, I'm using those things to get rid of your electric bill, not to stick more money in my pocket, right? The same thing applied in the construction methodology. The lenders would look at that product and say, Erik, this costs 15% more to build than just slapping cardboard together. And I say, true, if we're gonna own it for a year and we're gonna flip it, then maybe we just stick the cardboard together. But if we think about this over 100 years, tell me what 100 years of insurance premiums look like on an all concrete building versus cardboard. One of those is gonna burn, one of those is not. So over a long-term horizon, my insurance costs are less. That's more money in the developer's pocket without charging the tenant more rent. The construction risk, the builder's risk insurance is less. So all of these levers we pull to try to find ways. It's not perfect, right? That unit is still going to be more expensive than sticking two pieces of cardboard together. But the reality is, I just got rid of your light bill. We located it next to transit, so I've hopefully got rid of your car payment. I just reduced your insurance premiums, and I still got the investors to fund and finance it. So I call that progress. Not perfect, but progress. That's just a housing example. We've applied that same logic to everything, the stuff that we're doing in innovation and entrepreneurship. There are ways that you pull those levers to lever the playing field. And that's really been the cool thing about all of the varied things I've done in my career. The fault would be I'm not an expert on any of those things, but I've had enough experience in all of those sectors to understand where the pain points are and just come up with creative solutions to solve them. And I will leave you with this, and this is what I want to share with the audience and I share with everyone. Collaboration and partnership are key because I do a ton of things that, like, on the surface seem like I know enough to be dangerous, but if I don't have the partners that can actually execute, so that housing vision I just gave you, a byproduct of Jonathan Arnold, who was the most awarded housing developer in 2022. We knew enough to be dangerous, but without Jonathan bringing that final piece, we wouldn't be all the way there and prove it. Innovation, the work that we're doing with you and Craig Moore. I know enough to be dangerous in the innovation economy. You guys wrote the book on it. Literally, we're sitting in it. And so partnering with you guys has been a key. In every one of these sectors, we're working on a really cool aviation development at the downtown KC-Mo Airport. Partner with Carrie Gooch and the Red Tail Academy guys who really know that business. And so everything that we do, we're applying that intentionality around reducing cost, reducing friction, integrating community, and just there's a level of intentionality to it that we think yields a better outcome. But it's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. When we build the level of quality that we're going to build, we are going to get some pushback that it looks and it feels gentrifying. And our hope is that when the community sees the entrepreneurs that we support, the businesses that we support, the tenants that we put in it, the last piece of that is management. And you can say whatever you want to say, you can tell your presentation, but until you go execute it and do it, and the community says, you know what? You did what you said you were going to do. You told me that this neighborhood was going to still keep my grandma in place and keep, my family would have an opportunity to thrive here. And I think that's where our track record speaks for itself. Even going back to work that we've done in everything from formerly incarcerated housing, we've just done so many things where the impact at the end of the day speaks for itself, and you have to deliver on that. Otherwise, obviously the community will turn on you very quickly.
So Erik, in the various forms of development, the types of projects you've worked on, the types of investors you've worked with, what's been the most surprising piece of pushback that you've gotten from investors?
Oh, that's easy, dude. Greed is a mofo. Greed is.
But that doesn't surprise me, because I think that's the rep, right? That's what we all. That's the average person. When you think about development, when you think about a developer, they like, if you did, all right, word association, everybody, developer. Greed. Yeah. Thank you for playing the game. I really appreciate that.
They were being nice.
I appreciate that.
You said you were going to keep me in the chair. You're not going to keep me in the chair. Thank you, guys.
No. So why is, all right, you say that's surprising.
Well, listen, I mean, it's just so insidious. Like, the economy that we're in right now, I don't want to wade too far off into political, but you have people with $100 billion still trying to eke out a way to $400 billion or $1 trillion while we're talking about slashing healthcare and not solving the housing crisis. So that's where I'm like, it is surprising to me that 100 million or 100 billion wasn't enough. That's the part about greed that I don't understand, is it's just, by its own nature, it's never satisfied. And I think that's the hard part. You would like to believe at some point enough is enough, but what constantly surprises me is the amount of people that enough is just not enough. And it's sad to me because, I mean, San Francisco, it's another great thing. Think about San Francisco and Oakland. I mean, we're very fortunate here in the Midwest. We are starting to experience the level of homelessness and despair. When you see some of those things, you see an uptick in crime. The quality of life issues. So going back to kind of Stephen's thought, what originally sparked him to ask this Eastside dilemma was, he was like, why are people still starving? Why is there still so much disparity in this place of so much wealth and innovation? And I think when San Franciscans who would live in 10, 15, $20 million mansions would have to walk out of their Pacific Heights mansion and step over needles and feces and things like that, there did come a point where they did start to ask themselves, okay, was my greed worth it, right? And so anytime you got that amount of disparity and that amount of just a gap, and any economist, I'm not telling anybody here anything you don't know, this is the other part that's weird about greed. And this is where I try to educate investors. If you're truly greedy, the universe where everybody wins, you win more. If you think about it as a scarce game, you're always trying to take from someone else. So there are always winners and losers. In this world that we're in, we could continue growing the economy, create better wages, create better jobs, create more housing. Do those things well means sell more shit. More money is flowing through the economy. There is a universe where everybody could win. And so there comes a point at which greed circularly becomes bad because you start to choke out the thing that you love. And I think San Francisco really cemented that in my mind. You love this city, yet you're so focused on greed that you're willing to walk over needles and feces. Okay, wait a second, time out. We've got to fix that. And you're starting to see that gap shrink in some sectors, but in others, I mean, you know this.
Well, so this is, so yeah. I literally just had this conversation with someone this morning.
Yep.
There's this thesis out there and this fear out there that AI is going to drive us all into unemployment. It's coming after all your jobs. None of us are going to have jobs soon. And my reply to that is, not on this planet.
Right.
And the rationale that I have is the people who are driving those changes are capitalists, pure capitalists. And they want to make more money. And the only way they do that is if we have money in our pockets that we can spend. And the only way we have money in our pockets that we can spend on the things they want us to buy, even if they control all the marketplaces, even if they control all the things, the only way we have that money is if we're employed.
Yeah.
If we have jobs. And so somehow, we are in probably the greatest employment shift that we will ever know. Through the various phases of industrial revolutions, we've always seen this. Jobs don't go away, they just change. And jobs grow over time. We're gonna see the same thing. The shift is gonna be of a magnitude, a scale, and probably of a function that we're not comfortable with for a while. Mm-hmm. But we're gonna have jobs because they want us to have jobs.
Yep.
They need us to have jobs.
Yep.
So, they otherwise they would be killing capitalism, which is the very thing that drives the decisions that they're making right now. So anyway, all right, I'm off my soapbox.
No,
I'm
I
off my
agree with
soapbox
you.
for a second.
But I think then the question becomes, are those living wage, you know what I mean? Are those living wage jobs, and have we built an economy where everybody can thrive, or are we just barely surviving? And I think that is the part that scares me, is we've got to have a conscious mind shift to, as we're creating that new economy and those jobs, that we are being thoughtful about that. Let's expand the pie, not fight over a smaller pie. But I generally agree with you.
Yeah, no doubt. That's why, Craig and I always talk about, I get really uptight when people start talking about living wage. Like, we should try to get everybody to living wage. It's like, why? Like, that's not generational wealth building. That's not really, kind of sustaining our economy or the people that live in our communities. We need to start talking about thriving wages, not living wages. So anyway, clean energy.
Yeah.
So one of the thesis points of Eastside Innovation is this idea of clean energy, clean tech, and so on. So what's that journey been like for you? I mean,
it's a roller coaster.
Yeah. And it's especially the last few years have obviously been, a huge shift, or even last year.
Yeah, it's tough because, the saying, ignorance is bliss. And so you'd like to tell yourselves that when we didn't know any better, we made a bunch of mistakes. But now that we know better, we're going to solve them. And so there was a period of time where, as we knew the impacts of climate change, as we knew the impacts of industrialization, we knew that carbonization really more of a problem than industrial. But as we knew those impacts, we were course correcting. And so being at the forefront of innovation in clean energy meant risk. If you're going to drive policy shift away from 200 plus years of oil into a new economy around energy, the scale of that transition was going to have to be led by government and policy. And so we were in a nice place, again, going back to investors' mindset and risk. What government subsidy did was it helped turn that policy shift. It helped reorient that capital. So for us to be in a place where we knew, thanks to Stephen, we knew the harms of this thing, and we were out in front of it with innovative ideas. We really wanted to bring these ideas to Eastside communities, because let's face it, clean energy, the cat's out of the bag. Clean energy, EVs, all of those things are going to persist and grow. Then the question becomes, does our community get access to them, or do they only exist in other places? And so being the Eastsider that I am, we not only wanted those technologies to exist, we wanted them to exist in and for Eastside communities. And so the federal posture on it during the previous administration really added wind to our sails, particularly when we understood how you could continue to chip away at that risk profile using policy. And so, again, I don't want to derail this with politics, but I really had to learn, for a kid from the dot who wasn't that focused on politics and policy and really was just like, hey, keep your head down and grind and grind and grind. I had to understand that, especially with Stephen's thesis, this was all about power, and how power moves and policy moves is what's going to drive change. Long-winded story short, we had wind in our sails to power that in Eastside communities, de-risking it, using opportunity zones, which also could be a gentrifier. So in some circles, opportunity zones are a four-letter word. We want to use them positively. I think there needs to be intention around it. But anyways, combining federal subsidies, a policy shift towards clean energy, the market already wanting to go there, take the culture war away from EVs. And if you've driven an EV, it accelerates quickly. It makes no noise. I mean, it is a superior experience. Going back to a gas car felt like Fred Flintstone. I was yabba-dabba doing. But again, I wanted to make sure that in the East Side, we had access to those same things, right? I knew that there was inequity in the fact that being in the Bay Area and having a Tesla in 2016, no other kid from the dot was rolling a Tesla in 2016. I wanted to bring that back to the dot. We were in a federal posture where we could do that. Now that posture has changed back to, policies of the past, the drill, baby, drill. Let's always look for the cheapest solution, which is they think oil. That's only the cheapest solution if you're not thinking about the downstream impacts. So what do we now know 100 years later? We know that asthma rates are higher in Eastside communities, that diabetes. So if we again took that greedy drill baby drill hat off and we looked at the fact that over time, we are going to spend more if we keep relying on fossil fuels. Sure, you might pull it out of the ground a little cheaper, but when you have to cover the healthcare costs for another generation of Americans living with diabetes, heart disease, the risk factors are so great, and we know them now. And we can quantify the billions upon billions of dollars in health impact costs. If you add those two things together, clean energy becomes a no-brainer. The good thing is that I think that the private market, the prior administration got the ball far enough that I'm hopeful that the private market will continue to carry it. But sadly, just being honest with you, we have had to de-emphasize some of the clean energy portions of our projects because at the end of the day, Eastside communities still expect me to get stuff done. And if I can no longer de-risk that with that federal subsidy, we are having to just get more creative and kind of redo the capital stack. A great example in real time, the Indian Springs project was slated to get a $45 million greenhouse gas reduction fund, GGRF. It was a loan program created during the Biden-Harris administration, was going to put $20 billion into Eastside communities largely. And on day one of the new administration, the EPA pulled that grant program. Those funds ended up in court. A bunch of lawyers made a bunch of money, but those dollars did not end up in Eastside communities. And so that is the unfortunate part of the policy shift that we're in. Again, I'm not saying that to make excuses. We're going to power through it. We're going to use other policy tools, but you will continue to hear us advocating for both the private markets to fill that gap, and I think they will, but for the public markets to turn that back on, again, so that there's a level of equity in Eastside communities. But let's face it, the current policy posture in Washington is not favorable to solving for Eastside disparity. And I think that that's really unfortunate because it just reflects a scarcity mindset as opposed to a growth mindset. And being from an Eastside community, we're not looking for welfare. We're not looking for handouts. We're looking for opportunity. And we're looking for a playing field that we can go and play and innovate on. And again, thanks to the work that you're doing, the work that Craig's doing. I see like Quindaro Community Center here in the audience. We're going to continue to do that work. So failure is not an option, and we are not going to make excuses, but I'll be damned. There's an easier path and an easier road, and then there's a government that is actively working against you, and I feel like we're now facing those headwinds when we had some tailwinds. But the good thing is that's what elections are for. Every 4 to 8 years it changes.
TikTok, it's coming
up. Yeah, and we've just got to be aware of that. So
I have a T-shirt. I want to write this on like a mirror when I get ready in the mornings. That, like if it was easy, everybody be doing it.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Like because I think that's the mantra. Like you got to just keep grinding away at this stuff. I want to shift a little bit to some more maybe like of the leadership and insights that you've gained throughout your career. You've worked on multiple ventures. You've had the opportunity to work with different types of investors, different types of projects and so on. What failure has really kind of taught you the most about building responsibly?
Yeah, good questions. The first one goes back to, I touched on it earlier, the realization that as much as my mom said a lot of really prescient, powerful things to me, like you can do anything you put your mind to, that's not actually true. Control what you can control is probably the way that I would say that or rephrase that now. But the one big failure that sticks with me, we tried to open a hotel, not during COVID. We started it obviously before COVID, but an entrepreneur by the name of Damon Lawrence came to us with a phenomenal concept. Damon Lawrence is the CEO and owner of Homage Hospitality. If you guys don't know Homage Hospitality, Google Homage Hospitality, dope brand. The brand thesis was paying homage through the hospitality experience to all of America's great cities. And going back to that intentionality piece, right? Everybody likes nice things, but the lobby of every Marriott in the country is nice, but it's static. They figured out that if you could bring a hyper-local experience and you could tease out the culture and the community story what is it that really makes this hotel or this place unique and pay homage to it. Great brand. They opened up the most award-winning hotel in the entire country in 2018 in New Orleans, Louisiana. They opened up a hotel called The Moore. They paid homage to the stories of empowerment that came out of the slave trade. So when you understood the transatlantic slave trade, obviously New Orleans and Louisiana was a key hub of that. Everybody wants to talk about, the impact of, let's talk about how screwed up Louisiana still is. No disrespect to Louisiana, but you drive by the state prison in Baton Rouge, and there are still people in orange jumpsuits literally picking cotton in fields, and I'm talking about 2025. So we need to understand that all of the issues are not fixed with just slavery going away. This new incarceration economy still bears a lot of that. But as opposed to only focusing on the painful side of that narrative, there are stories of empowerment that have come out of that. A great one being one of the top-selling liquor brands in the country right now is Uncle Nearest. Uncle Nearest was the slave who taught Jack Daniels how to do bourbon or whiskey, right? And so a homage hotel would lean into those narratives and understand how Black culture really fit into the empowerment of a city, and it would tell you a story that you didn't know. It would tell you the Uncle Nearest story of your town. Anyways, won a bunch of awards. We went to go scale that brand. Damon was counting on me as the capital partner. I said, hey man, I know very little about the hotel business, but I love you and I love your brand. We will figure this out together. We came really close. We were under contract on a 100-key property on Lake Merritt in Oakland. We went under contract on it like December of 2019. We had to raise $20 million. We got like 17, 18. We were close. We were maybe 10% apart, $2 million away. I called my lender. I remember on late February, I called my lender. I said, we're going to push this out 30 days. I think that by the end of March, we'll be able to get that last $2 million in. I remember I was on spring break with my kids. I get a call on March 15th. Hey, Erik, are you tracking this whole virus thing? Yeah, sure. It'll blow over, right? This was literally like day one of COVID. Calls me back the next day. Hey, man, I don't think this is blowing over. By the end of the week, I'm ending spring break with my kids. Your loan is not happening until we figure out what this COVID, and again, there were all you got to think back to being in that moment. COVID killed a hotel deal. The brand was solid. The entrepreneur was solid. We were so close, but no amount of hard work was going to power through trying to open a hotel for a nascent startup during COVID. So that was probably failure number one. If anybody sees Damon, tell him I love him. I hope he's not still upset, and he's not. He's gone on to do great things in the industry. We both kind of had to swallow the fact that was out of our control. I think the next one that's more in my control is choose your partners carefully. And that goes to everything. Luckily, I've been married almost 20 years now. My wife is fantastic, so I made great decisions there. She probably thinks the opposite. I think I did well. Her decision-making was questionable.
She's still here.
Exactly. She's still here. Kevin loves me. Craig loves me. So I'm not too bad. But I made very good decisions there. I've made great decisions on most of my business partners. But going back to what I said earlier, you can't change everybody. And not all capital is good capital. We started a company supporting formerly incarcerated entrepreneurs in Oakland, California. We needed capital. It's a tough space to raise capital in. And so we bent, for lack of a better term, we bent our standards to get this dollars in the door. Capital partner, of course, says all the right things. But ultimately, we didn't do our due diligence, and they did not have the same level of love and respect for the rest of the partners that I did. So that got messy. It ends up, there's litigation and there's all these things. And that's the other thing. Litigation just makes lawyers money. So it's much cheaper to stick to your guns, to choose good partners, to do the right thing, and just try to cut bad people and bad outcomes out of your life. So those are the two things that stick out in my mind. Control what you can control. COVID was not in our control, but it still stung. And when you can control it, be diligent, pick good partners, because it matters. And you want to do, now we all say it's a no asshole rule.
Yeah.
If anybody gives you that heebie-jeebie, trust your gut. and just people say, "Oh, Erik, all money is green." Nah, my sanity is more important than all money is green.
Well, so I was going to ask you about that. So, like,
yeah.
having the personal balance between high finance and community development.
Yep.
And the work that you've done with the .love coalition, pulling together community leaders, trying to, really get everybody invested in moving that in the same. It's a very different mentality, a very different crowd than maybe the high finance crowd. How do you personally balance those worlds?
Yeah, again, just try to do business with good people. Try to tell them up front. I try to apply this in my personal life too. Communication early and often. If you're going to work with me, they know what they're getting into. And you touched on it, man. I'm not for everybody. The fact that you let me sit on this stage when you know...
It was great risk. It was with great risk. I know that.
It's a great risk,
absolutely.
exactly.
Absolutely.
So you know what you're signing up for. I do think that together we're going to do great things, but it is an acquired taste, and I'm very upfront with people about the flavor that we are going to have. We are going to do things that are innovative. We are going to make money because at the end of the day, I like nice shit too. So we are all going to do things that make money, but we are going to do it the right way. We're going to do it by uplifting others. I would love for everybody to participate as opposed to me get mine at your expense. And I treat my investors the same way. They can't take advantage. Investors can't take advantage of us as sponsors or entrepreneurs. And as business owners and developers, we also can't take advantage of communities. We've all got to work together, in order to make this work. And so, yeah, we have that conversation early and often. We apply the no asshole rule. And then we do what we say we're going to do. And we can control. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. We've also learned, and this was hard for me, and people say it in tech all the time, but fail fast.
I don't like that.
I don't like to fail at all. Like,
right.
How about we just not fail at all?
Yeah, the goal isn't failing.
And then even when you do fail, like I've never failed. I just learned something very painful or expensive, but it was learning, so, but I think we've also had to just be realistic. Again, control what you can control. Don't try to force a partnership that doesn't work. Don't try to force a deal that doesn't work. Another thing we're working on right now, this is maybe a little bit personal. As a kid who grew up in Wyandotte County, who thanks to the public school education that I got in Wyandotte County, and so I tell everybody who will listen that I am a byproduct of the environment that I grew up in. So whatever preconceived notion you brought about Wyandotte County to this discussion, if you think it's negative, don't offend me with it because I am going to be offended. And I am proof positive that the public education that we get in Wyandotte County works. The parents and the teachers, it works. Everything is possible, but the sad reality that the things that we are trying to do to innovate in the east side of Wyandotte County, due to the disinvestment that has occurred over the last 60 years, there's no other way to say it. I came home thinking about level 3, 4, and 5 innovation, thinking about how do I make the utilities cheaper using clean energy? How do I make the quality of the housing better, thinking about longevity? The reality is that we are still facing hunger in our community. We're facing homelessness. We're facing job loss. And those gaps are getting worse, not better. And it took some reframing of my mind to even say we're going to have to slow down and really roll our sleeves up on levels 1 and 2 of Maslow's hierarchy, because no matter how much I want to get to level 3 and 4, I've got to bring everybody along with me. And if we try to force a level 3 or 4 before my own community is ready, then it's not going to work. And so that goes back to the partnership angle. It's really great to come home. I mean, we're going to give Craig his flowers. He's not even here. But to realize that Craig Moore has been doing this work with you and with Black excellence in the community for 7, 8, 10 years now. So we're not starting on square one. That we can go partner with Craig, that Reverend Gladys and Miss Gaitan and the team at Quindaro Community Center has the framework to do it. But we can then take the programming that we've got and the strategies and innovation that we've got. Like, these ingredients exist. if I can even slow down and reframe my mind and think about how do we get level 1 and 2, get everybody to a place where we all feel good about moving to level 3 and 4 together. And it's been great to have receptive partners in that, but it's also been a little painful to have to recognize that this place that I love and these people that I love are still struggling, and that we can all do better. And I think that's what motivates me on a personal level, that we all deserve better. And I'm appreciative of you, man, because we're doing that kind of work together. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, Craig and I, we got a saying that we bounce off each other all the time, which is, how do you build a legacy? How do you build something that's going to last well beyond you? And it's one brick at a time.
That's right.
So we just got to do this one brick at a time, man.
Yeah, man.
And if it's levels 1, 2, we'll build it up and we'll get there. Last question.
Yeah.
If you could redesign an Eastside community, ground up, no constraints at this point in time, what's the first thing you'd build and why?
Ooh, what is the first thing you build and why? I mean, I think it all starts with housing. If you don't have a roof over your head, then you can't really think about much else. And so I really think that housing is the key, because the things that housing drives, both psychologically, safety and security, density. In order to power entrepreneurship, you need people. In order to power business, you need people. So getting people in a place where we're together, we're safe, we're secure, we've got a roof over our head. All right, then we can think about, all right, what's next? What are we going to eat? Where are we going to work? But I think it all starts with housing. But that's a hard one. I mean, actually, I'm going to take that one home tonight and think about it, because, again, I've realized that everything is so interrelated.
It's a good answer though, man. You got to have a roof over your head.
Having a house, but the lights aren't on sucks. Having the house and the lights on, but there's no food in the fridge sucks. Having all that, but not having both the pride and the dignity and also the opportunity of great employment, great reward. I mean, so all of those things are related. And I'll maybe leave you with this. I don't know where we are on time. Oh, shoot, we're at time. That's why Gwen walked up. Thank you, Gwen. You're going to have to drag me off stage, but this is great. Michael Odupitan, entrepreneur I introduced you to, he's doing similar work in Topeka with OmniCircle that Keystone is doing here in Kansas City. And he said it to me really well. It stuck with me, so I'm going to give Michael credit for this. He said, Erik, there's four levels: dependence, independence, interdependence, and transcendence. And you can't get to the next level until you realize the other one. So we're over here thinking about how do we bring our community together to transcend and to do all these really powerful things in innovation and economy. But if you're still at the dependence level, you're just striving to get to independent, where I can take care of myself. Then when you get to independent, you start to feel comfortable. You're like, oh, I got this. But if you don't realize that the sooner we become interdependent and we work together, my I got this plus your I got this becomes we got this. And so just understanding those levels. And so watching Michael take me through that journey and take Topeka through that journey, watching Craig take KCK through that journey, just understanding that journey is really powerful. So that's the other thing, man. I'm always trying to learn. I appreciate you putting this on so I can learn from this. This is great. So I think we're out of time, but this is great, man.
Yeah, I'm a big believer. You said this earlier about partnerships and picking the right partners. I'm a big believer. I tell my kids all the time, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? That's just a life thing that you got to just accept. And so if you're, when I think about, as I started this journey, the second time I started this journey in 2018, had the chance to travel around the country and learn from others who were kind of doing this. The thing I heard most often was, this is not about real estate. Don't let this be about real estate. Yep. And when you finally decide the place that you need to have to support the programming and the placemaking, you need to find those people who are mission aligned, those partners who understand the why that you need a place, the why you need the spaces, the why you need to start bringing placemaking into the fold. And so I feel lucky to have, and look, if you can't sense the passion from this cat tonight, I can't help you.
I stayed in my chair though, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. We kept you there. But thank you for being a good partner. Thank you for being mission aligned and for really trying to bring something good. And I'm excited about what we're going to build together, man. So thanks for being here. Thanks for the work you're doing in KCK.
Yeah.
And thanks for what you're bringing to Kansas City.
No doubt, man. Thank you. Listen, I'll end with this. We said housing. A roof over your head is the basic need for living. A place like an innovation district is the housing for entrepreneurs and economy. So this is the housing element to the economy that you're trying to create. So I thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
I am going to use that for sure.
You can have it. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yep.